everybody, welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we have another Star Trek, which is totally awesome. A neat thing about today is we are starting season 2. So we've got all the way through the first 10 and now we're moving on to the second 10. And I was talking about it with my brother and we decided that it would be probably a good idea to set up some kind of criteria for rating these episodes. Obviously, they're all pretty dang good. You know, I really love this series, so they're all getting at least 6s, right? It came up because we were discussing the second episode of the second season and how amazing it is. And my brother was like, yeah, but there's no space, which is totally true, right? That's a legitimate complaint. Even though the episode's amazing, it's not about space. So we thought, wow, we need some criteria. So I've got 4 categories that we're going to go over here. I want to define them so that everybody knows about the criteria. The first one is heart. You know, it's kind of a silly criteria to pick for this show because this show, that's kind of its main focus, is having heart. So I feel like all of these episodes are going to get a very high rating in this category. But the definition of heart for these episodes is going to be like the crew working together, the crew respecting each other, and also the crew respecting others, the aliens that they meet, and so on. That's kind of just a basic definition of heart for these episodes. Also, just how good they make you feel when you watch them, you know. The second category is science. So this is going to cover, this is kind of a broad category. It's going to cover things like tactics, interesting space facts, different kinds of ships that they have, medicines and things like that they bring up. Also conversations that they could have about scientific facts. Anything that kind of falls into just hard science is going to go into this category. The third category is philosophy. And this, I think this was kind of the main emphasis of the original series. They really wanted to touch on moral issues and how should people be treated and things like that. And that's kind of the definition for this third category, is really moral discussions that could be had. And the fourth category, this is kind of a vague one, but a very important one. This is what my brother was missing from that second episode we were talking about. I didn't really know what to call it, so I called it mystery. Now, we have to define that, of course, because I don't mean somebody gets killed and nobody knows who the murderer is, right? It's kind of a combination of like awe and maybe even a little bit of fear about what is out there, what might we run into. A good example of this is probably the beginning of the first Star Trek episode ever, way back to Pike. I think it was called The Cage. I know that the two-parter's called The Cage. But I think it was called The Cage. I'm not sure. But it was the original pilot, just the Pike stuff. And that opens with they detect something ahead of them. And they don't know what it is. And Pike is saying, how far away is it? And they're giving him this countdown for when it's going to hit the ship. And they try to do a visual, but they can't see anything in front of them. And it's getting closer and closer. And I literally think he says, brace for impact, and then nothing happens. And he turns to Spock, like, what was it? And Spock says, it was a sound wave. Right? And that kind of falls under science, but really kind of the mystery of not fully understanding what we would be up against when we go out there. And I know that the sound wave was probably man-made, right? It's not some weird alien that would blow our minds. But that kind of approach to things, I think, is really cool and kind of mysterious. Another example from the original series, they had this alien. I think the basic gist of the episode is there's this alien who is kind of unable to compete out in the universe. So they set up this puppet to kind of be their spokesperson or to kind of scare off anybody who might come to attack them or hurt them in any way. So you meet this really mysterious, terrifying puppet. And then, of course, by the end of the episode, you realize that it's really just this alien who seems really nice. But seeing that puppet is so scary, and I mean, I even think they started including it in the closing credits, just the puppet, just showing that in their little montage of images, because it is part of the mystery and the awe and the scariness that we might find going out into space. And that's kind of an important category that these episodes should be judged by, because this is science fiction. This is trying to predict the future and trying to teach us about ourselves and wondering what mysteries will we uncover. So that's got to be an important category, a very important category, because we kind of want to have our minds blown. We want to walk away going, that was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. We need that. So those are the 4 categories that we're going to use to gauge these episodes now as we go on. So here we go, starting with episode 1 of the 2nd season. So it opens up, this is the episode where Spock steals the Enterprise. But the episode opens with these really cool, a great space shot, right? You start off above the space station that's outside of Jupiter there, and you're following this ship, and this ship is doing crazy things. It like goes straight down the spire all the way down. It's swooping through things and cutting around things, and you realize as you see different ships that it's coming up to, that it's tiny. It's a drone ship, right? And it's used in repairs. And that's not a normal Star Trek thing. Like most of the time, if you ever see the Enterprise in space dock, there's always like 3 humans like trying to wave in their spacesuits or whatever, you know what I mean? But this is the first time they've really kind of said it's more like the future that we can now see as opposed to the future that we could see back in the 70s, So yeah, they're drones, and there's thousands of them swarming these ships doing repairs and all kinds of stuff. So that was pretty neat. I really enjoyed that. They spent a lot of money on those shots, probably, which is a good thing. We want to see the cool ships, and we want to see space. It's an important piece of all of this. This is the episode where Spock first gets his musical instrument. He uses a musical instrument in the original series, but this is the episode where M'Benga actually gives it to him. He's been having some trouble with his emotions, so he gives it to him to calm him down. And there's kind of this neat moment where as he's playing, his heart rate slows down, but then Nurse Chapel walks in and all of his fear and anxiety and heart rate and everything shoots through the roof just because she walked in. There's a neat scene where Uhura is monitoring any transmissions that they may be receiving. They're in space dock getting repairs, so there's not much need for them to be doing their jobs. In fact, there are other people trying to work on the systems and everything. And Uhura refuses to step away from her station until she can get some kind of another station set up, which is just showing how dedicated she is and how important it is to her that she do her job well. And it's kind of lucky, of course, the only reason the episode could happen, because while she's monitoring this other station that she could have just said, nah, never mind, I'm just going on break. You know, while she's monitoring that, she does get the distress call that kicks the whole mission off. We get Spock's. There's of course, part of the advertising campaign for this season is Spock in the captain's chair giving his version of the hit it or engage or whatever. And his is, I would like the ship to go now. I would like the ship to go fast now, which is super funny. It's a really great line. And I know why they pulled it out for the advertising, because it really reminds you of how fun it is to watch these episodes. They're great. And this is a dark episode, to be perfectly honest. There's good humor in this, but it is dark. It's a very interesting, cool episode. And the pilot says her key phrase is going to be "Vamonos," which I thought was excellent. Very cool. They have a new engineer because, of course, they killed off Hemmer. I'm not positive why they did that, but I guess it's just to keep the stakes high, just so you know that that could happen, you know. If you haven't seen these characters in later Star Trek episodes, it could be because they're dead, right? So that's interesting. We've seen most of them, but there's a few we haven't seen, and they could kill them off, I guess. So they have a new engineer. Carol Kane is playing the role. She's from, well, of course, she's done a ton of things. She's a great actress. I know her from Princess Bride, when they go to visit the miracle worker. The miracle worker's wife is Carol Kane. She's great. She's good in the episode. I'm not sure what they're going to do with this. They have an actor for Scotty. They're just choosing not to use him yet. And of course, we don't need it to be Scotty, but it would be nice if it was just kind of the same person, you know, so that we could get to know and like them. Another example of that is, of course, you've got the pilot of the ship, who's one of the main characters, but then sitting right next to her is another character that's really cool, but it's not always her. Same thing with the person running the teleporter, right? We get to meet this character who's super cool, but then they've got somebody else over and over. I don't know. It's a very strange... I'm not sure how that kind of B cast is working. Because they bring him in and take him out, bring him in. I don't know. Maybe it's just a pay thing. If they're just like, we can only afford 5 constant people, everybody else has to be totally part-time or whatever. I'm not sure. But it'd be nice for them to have more full-time people, I guess, is what I'm saying. So... yeah, this gets real dark real fast, because you've got a couple of vets, being the Doctor and Nurse Chapel, and M'Benga and Nurse Chapel fought in the Klingon War, and apparently it got pretty dang bad. So when they get kidnapped by the Klingons in this episode, it turns out that M'Benga has a super drug that he always carries with him because of what he's been through, just in case. And it turns out that in this case, they really could use it. So they juice up with this super drug and they go nuts killing Klingons. It's a crazy, crazy few scenes. It's kind of a John Woo thing. The director for this was pretty experimental. They turn the camera upside down. There's a lot of slow motion. There's all kinds of things. When they take the drugs, of course, the little drug dispensers kind of look like guns. So they take the drugs in their necks, I think, and then they drop them, and they fall in slow motion, which is right out of John Woo. You know, with somebody running out of bullets and then dropping their guns to get 2 more guns or whatever, you know. They really played a lot with that kind of stuff while they were filming these really intense fight scenes. It's pretty wild, and Mbenga kind of tortures this Klingon to get information that he needs. It's pretty intense. Um, the one problem that I have with it is only one Klingon has a gun. They only use a gun once. Everything's hand to hand. But literally within this little segment, as Mbenga's torturing this Klingon, um, the Klingon says we have 30 people, 30 Klingons, and they all have disruptors and blasters and some other type of Klingon blaster. I can't remember the third. They mentioned three types of phasers, basically. So everybody's got guns. Everybody's got guns. And I don't understand why there's no shooting. Now, if he wouldn't have brought up the guns at all, it wouldn't have been a problem. Because there's a scene earlier where there's some Klingons trying to buy some guns, and they can only get, I think, two. They literally can only get two, and it's really expensive. And the last thing the Klingon says is, we need a lot more of these. If they just would have left it at that, then it would have made perfect sense that nobody has guns, you know. But for that Klingon, and he could have been lying, but once again, don't want to make excuses for the script, you know what I mean? If the Klingon's going to choose to lie to try to scare them from going and trying to escape, then we need to kind of know that that's happening, you know? We don't want to make excuses for the show. So that was a little bit weird, but the sequences are pretty jaw-dropping. I mean, it's a really, really good-looking show. It always has been. But I guess because it's the season opener, you know, they really kind of upped everything. The fight scenes are pretty amazing. Another kind of weird part that bothered me a little bit is the Enterprise can't be where it is. It's not supposed to be there. They literally stole the ship and brought it to a place in space where they could cause a war just by being there. They're not supposed to be there. So what they're doing is hiding in the rings. Well, they call it rings, although when they show the shot, there's a moon that's been half destroyed and all the debris is spread out, and they're hiding in all of this debris here. Huge chunks of ice and everything. I don't know if I'd literally call that rings, but they do say rings in the episode, so I guess they were rings. They're hiding in there, watching this other planet, and then suddenly this Klingon cruiser shows up at the planet. And they're like, it's okay, we're hiding in the ice, they won't be able to detect us, everything's cool. Then, from that planet, a Federation ship breaks out of the ground and goes up into space to attack that Klingon ship in order to start a war. Now, as it's coming up, somehow it gets in the debris of the moon with the Enterprise, and the Enterprise is chasing it through the debris as it goes toward the Klingon ship that it needs to shoot. And maybe I've got this backwards. Maybe, and I wish they would have gone more into depth with this, maybe the moon that's been shattered is where everything is. Maybe it broke out of that ground, and maybe for some weird reason the Klingons are going to this other planet. You know, I wish they would have clarified that a little bit, because it makes no sense that all of a sudden they're chasing this ship through the debris. They're literally shooting at it. It's launching torpedoes back, and this Klingon ship has no idea that any of that's happening. And then it pops out of the debris. The Klingon ship sees it. The Enterprise comes out of the debris. The Klingon ship sees that one, and then the Enterprise blows up the other ship. So the other ship didn't get to fire on the cruiser, But literally, there was two ships fighting each other. They're both Starfleet, and luckily Spock is able to convince these Klingons that it was a rogue ship that was built to harm them in order to start the war. And that part's all right. That part's pretty fun because we get to see Spock, drinking alcohol and trying to act like he's partying. Always, always the best thing to see about Spock. And I think this episode handled it pretty well because Spock was being more emotional than normal. But that's still much less emotional than we're used to, right? So watching him at this party, trying to act like a boisterous Klingon is super fun, because he's not doing it right at all. But he feels like he's going way out of bounds, you know what I mean? So I like Spock like this. This is the way, this is the right way, I think, to handle Spock, and they did a very good job of that. But the weird ship stuff, just, I didn't really understand what was going on with the tactics and everything. And it worked well to put Spock in a more emotional place because he's aware that Nurse Chapel and M'Benga are probably on that ship. So he's stalling as long as he can before he blows it up so that he can try to get them off the ship. Now, they can't track them in any way. They've lost their signal. I'm not sure why they can't track them, why they can't see how many humans are on the ship. Maybe it's just because the shields are up. Like, it could literally be that the ship has shields because they built that ship in a cave, But I guess it has shields, and it must have had the shields up so they couldn't read anything and they couldn't beam anybody off. They just had to wait to see if either of them had a plan that would get them off the ship, which of course they did. They literally just jumped out the airlock, and then then they could get their signal and beam them aboard. So, yeah, it's a good episode. This, of course, is right at the time that Nichelle Nichols passed away. So at the end of the credits, there's a For Nichelle post, just in remembrance of her, which is nice. So if we're going to try to use our new criteria to rate this, heart, of course, is through the roof. This is an episode where Spock is really dealing with the fact that he's madly in love with Nurse Chapel, but he doesn't want to leave his girlfriend. He can't decide what to do. His emotions are a little unhinged because at the end of the last season, he had to break down his barriers to get emotional in order to get the Gorn to chase him, right? So he's more emotional and he's in love with her. And then you've got M'Benga and Nurse Chapel getting the crap beat out of themselves and beating the crap out of all these Klingons. It's a crazy one. So there's a lot of heart in this episode, I feel. Now, I do want to say, killing off a bunch of Klingons is not a lot of heart, but it's weird. It's weird that they kidnap these guys who are war vets and who have been through this kind of a situation before and fought their way out. It's very emotional. I'm going to say it's a 10 for heart. Most of these, because this is the way the show is built, most of these are going to be super high for heart. Science. So there's a lot in this with the drones and seeing the ships, and you get to see Jupiter. There's fun science stuff, but then it kind of starts to fail as we get into how many guns do they have, and where is the ship coming from, and why don't the Klingons see it yet? And there's some muddiness for the actual science side of it. So I'm going to probably give this one like a 7. Because of the drones and stuff in the beginning. That was pretty fun. Philosophy, moral questions. I think this episode doesn't delve into that much. Of course, you have these two vets being taken prisoner and them fighting their way out, but there's no real discussion of, is there another way to handle this? You know, they literally just go kill them all with their super drug. And it's set up so that there really isn't another way. It's pretty clear. So it's not like a plot problem. It's just that there's just really not a lot of moral discussion in this, even though there might have been able to be. So for the philosophy category, I think this is pretty low. This is just a lot more kind of action and, driving forward. So I'd probably give it like a 4, maybe, because they are vets and they are now prisoners, not prisoners of war, because a war technically hasn't been declared, but they're prisoners and they do have to get out of it, and they have the weird drug, and what's the legality of this super drug, and is that a good thing? So it raises some interesting points, but it doesn't really go into it. So we're going to go with like a 4 for that. We'll get better at this as we go. And mystery, once again, I don't think there's really any mystery to this. Of course, there's plot mystery, where she sends a distress signal saying, I need help now. And you don't know what she needs help for. You don't realize that there's this group that literally wants to restart the war so they can make profit again, and that's another weird thing, because replicators, and I know in the original series, they don't go too much into the replicators, what can the replicators make, what can't they make. I don't think it's brought up too much in the original series. I think they're really kind of just used for food, straight up. So maybe it's possible that wealth is still something that people could chase. But I always feel weird about it by the time you get to the next generation, because you could make pretty much anything in there. So there's not a lot of mystery in this episode. I'm probably going to go with a 4 there as well. So they've got 2 4s. We got a 10 and a 7. And then these 2 4s, right? So they got a 25 out of 40. So overall, I would say this is a pretty good episode, right? It's probably is landing around a 6 or a 7. I did have a little more fun watching it, I feel like, than it being a 6 or 7. But all that tactical stuff is so rough that maybe it deserves to be there around a 6 or a 7. But the heart is there. It's definitely one that you gotta see, especially if you're following the Nurse Chapel Spock situation, All right, well, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this, hit the like button, and if you want more like this, definitely subscribe. We've got a ton of Star Trek that you still can watch, and there's a ton of Star Trek to come, of course. I think we're going to start diving into Lower Decks, which should be tons of fun, I think. And I know that supposedly there's going to be a new series called Star Trek Academy, which might be really fun. I'm really hoping that they can nail that thing and just be really enjoyable. There's an episode in Discovery where there's some students who have to go out with a teacher. Kind of a Lower Decks idea, honestly. You get these characters that aren't the normal characters being thrown into a situation that they're not completely prepared for. They have no experience. They have knowledge, but they have no experience. And I think it's tons of fun to watch that. So hopefully this Starfleet Academy will just be a blast. My only fear is that we'll lose the mystery altogether because it'll all take place in the school. You know, we don't really need another Harry Potter. Harry Potter's tons of fun, you know, don't get me wrong. But we don't really need that. It'd be fun to get some more wonder and excitement and awe about exploration. So hopefully we'll see a lot of that and the school. We'll see. All right. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.